بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم نور قلوبنا بالعلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم افتح بيننا وبين قومنا بالحق وأنت خير الفاتحين ثم أما بعد. Domestic violence from an Islamic perspective. I think this is one of the interesting and one of the stimulating topics that people talk about over and over and over, from a cultural perspective, from a practice perspective, from a Sharia perspective. And to start with, we live here in this society in which there are many misconceptions are quite spread about Islam. Many people do not know many facts about Islam, unfortunately including Muslims themselves. So how about people of different faith? And there is I don't want to call it like a movement, but actually it is more than to be like a campaign, okay, of spreading or showing the worst image about Islam, or what is called nowadays Islamophobia, especially after the incident of September 11th. There are many movements here and there and tries here and there to show the worst image about Islam. And unfortunately, there are some general acceptance of the following misconceptions about Islam. Islam cannot adapt new realities. For example, Islam does not share common values with other major faiths. I mean, this is what some people might think about our deen. Islam as a religion is inferior to the West. It is inferior to the West. Unfortunately, it is outdated, barbaric, and irrational. This is what some people think. Unfortunately, some of them are Muslims, believe it or not. Islam is a religion of violence and support terrorism. And the list actually goes on and on and on. Now, what does this have to do with the domestic violence? Before we proceed, let's just focus a little bit on the expected role from us, from Muslim community. I mean, there are some misconceptions. People have different views about Islam and Muslims. So what we are expected to do? I mean, that's a part of our job, to defend our religion. So before you stand and talk about your deen, you have to be strongly supported with a very solid background in Islamic knowledge. You have to educate yourself. Because when you start talking about Islam, you are referring to the Quran and to the Sunnah, to the practice of the Prophet ﷺ. So you have to be well educated in this area. You cannot just speak your mind like this, because this is a deen. I mean, we are not just saying our mind or what we believe in or what we think. No, we are actually representing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, representing His Prophet ﷺ. So in order for you to put yourself in this position and to start talking about Islam, you have to be well educated in your religion. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? What did the Prophet ﷺ say? And what did our Muslim scholars, the previous and the contemporary, are talking about this subject? Number two, having knowledge by itself is not enough. I know many people who have knowledge, but they do not have that care or self-motivation. You could have knowledge, but actually you should care about your deen. You should care about your deen. You should be a self-motivated person who really so caring about his deen. I don't want anyone to tackle my deen. I don't want anyone to spread the wrong or the fake information about my deen. So I have to be serious enough about this issue. And number three, even if we have the knowledge, even if you have the self-motivation, this is not enough. Always actions speak louder than words. We have to show other people that this is the deen that we believe in as we practice it. People from different faiths around us do not care so much about what is written in the Quran, do not care so much about what is written in the Sunnah. As a matter of fact, they do not even read their own Bible. So how about the scripture of people of different faith? They understand Islam. They understand Islam based on the way that we behave, we represent ourselves within the American society at large. And this is also not enough, in my opinion. We have to be strongly involved in the society at large. You have to be deeply and strongly involved in politics. deeply and strongly involved in media, deeply and strongly involved in interfaith dialogue. We have to get involved in the society. That's called the civic engagement. So as long as we are going with the isolation model, we just put ourselves in a box and we close it completely, so to be far away, to be distant from other people, we cannot actually interact. We cannot talk to people. We cannot correct the misunderstanding that those people have about our deen. How severe this issue is, domestic violence in the US. And when I say in the US, we are included because we are Muslim Americans. We are Muslims, alhamdulillah, but we are Americans. We live here in this society. So all these statistics and numbers that I'm going to share with you, actually we are included, believe it or not. Let's go to some data here. Look at the United States Department of Justice according to their website. So when I say United States Department of Justice, this is an authentic and official source of information. They divided the crimes here in the US in those 5 categories: murder, which is the worst, rape or other sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault, and simple assault. What is shocking actually here is that if you read more in their statistics, you go back to 2007, violent crime offenses in 2007 here in the US were around 1.5 million, 1,408,000 incidents that has been reported. And that's something really shocking and amazing. So domestic violence in general is a serious issue in the American society. When you talk about 100 or 1.5 million, domestic violence crimes, whether it is the worst, the murder, or the least, which is the simple assault, but at the end of the day, it is actually reported and documented as a domestic violence. How about murder in the US? Look at these shocking numbers: 16,929 murder offense in 2007, in the same year. This actually means that from every 100,000 people, almost 6 people have been killed. 6 people have been killed. Now, what is amazing here to know, what is interesting to know, is that 1/8 of the homicides, the murder crimes, are a man killing his wife. So now we are zooming in on the issue of domestic violence. 1/8 of the homicides, murders, are a man killing his wife, which is so-called domestic violence. The topic of this seminar is domestic violence from an Islamic perspective. So let's be, academic a little bit. Let's go to the definition of domestic violence and the definition of Sharia, and then we can just conjunct them together and come up with a proper understanding of the domestic violence from an Islamic perspective. Listen to the definition of domestic violence according to Wikipedia. It's a pattern. Pattern means like a common practice. It's not a one-time incident or twice or thrice. It's a pattern. So when you talk about domestic violence, it is a lifestyle. Someone actually who is usually resolves his problem violently by shouting, by screaming, by hitting, by beating, by reacting violently. So it is a pattern of abusive behaviors by either one or both partners. So domestic violence could be practiced by one party in the household, and it could be just a mutual, domestic violence by the 2 parties in an intimate relationship. Because of the non-Islamic culture, they mentioned the dating like a boyfriend and a girlfriend, in addition to the marriage, family, friends, or cohabitation. It means that people who are very close to each other, and they practice what is called the domestic violence. As an example, it includes the physical aggression. It could be just hitting, could be kicking, could be beating up, or even threat thereof. Like if someone did not even practice, did not hit somebody else, but he started threatening that if you do such and such, I'm gonna hit you, I'm gonna beat you up. This is actually counted or classified as domestic violence. Sexual abuse, we all know what does it mean, sexual abuse. Emotional abuse, controlling, like dominating people, bullying, persecution, and economic deprivation. All the above and much more actually are counted as domestic violence. This is actually from a legal perspective. Well, in Islam actually we have to differentiate. We have to differentiate between what is called domestic violence and what is called the physical discipline. There is a difference from a pure Islamic perspective. So physical discipline is different from domestic violence. Physical discipline is what a person in charge is practicing to discipline the other party or the other person that he has a sort of authority over him. So if a teacher, for example, wisely, as needed, not violently, found out that a certain student, again I'm talking about from a very pure Islamic and fiqh perspective, okay, found out that this student actually is too misbehaving himself, maybe violent, misbehaving, does not listen, does not have a self-respect, does not obey, does not listen, and he found out that this person or this student needs to be physically disciplined without harming him, without bothering him, without injuring him, and he just physically disciplined him. That is not counted. That's not counted as domestic violence. We'll go actually through more details as we go with this presentation. If a husband, for example, found himself in a position or a situation in which the only way, the only method of disciplining his wife is to do what is called the physical discipline, that is not counted as domestic violence. Again, domestic violence is a pattern, is a lifestyle, is a practice, is a regular practice by a person, and that is absolutely different from physical discipline. So domestic violence is wider in scale and more aggressive than physical discipline. This is the first difference. Domestic violence is an attitude, as I said. It's a lifestyle. Some people, the first thing to think about whenever they face a problem is just to start beating and hitting, or at least shouting and screaming and abusing other parties. Symptoms for the domestic violent person is always, or in most cases, he's a screamer, abusive and aggressive person. Even in the way that he or she talks, actually, you can tell that he has a lot of aggressiveness in his approach. So we said in the beginning, we're going to talk about domestic violence from a Sharia perspective. Now, this is the definition of domestic violence from a legal perspective, and this is the differentiation between the domestic violence versus physical discipline. And I want you to remember this term. Physical discipline is different from domestic violence. Now, when you say from a Sharia perspective, what do you mean by Sharia? Generally speaking, the Islamic law or the legal ruling. Sometimes actually we talk about al-hukm al-taklifi, or the injunctive ruling. It means that every single practice, every single action that you might do during your day, early in the morning, once you wake up until you go back to your bed and sleep, whatever you practice during the day could be classified or could have one of 5 different rulings. Whatever you do, you eat, you drink, you come to the salah, you go to work, you study, you walk, you talk, whatever you do has actually to have a rule in the Islamic Sharia or in the Islamic ruling. It could be a wajib, like an obligatory act. It could be a mustahab, like a recommended act. It could be permissible, amrun mubah. It could be disliked, makruh, and it could be prohibited or haram. Those are the 5 different categories. Every single act that you could ever think about in Islam must have a rule. Either obligatory act, recommended, permissible, disliked, or otherwise prohibited. Al-wajib, wal-mustahab, wal-mubah, wal-makruh, wal-haram. So our job tonight is to answer a very simple question. If we can come up with an agreed upon definition of domestic violence, what is its status in Islam? Is it permissible? Is it recommended? Is it makruh? Is it haram? Is it wajib? This is actually what we need to learn. Okay, back to the main source of our deen, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look at the very high standard that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set for the spouses when they live together. Harmony and mercy. من آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها. Among his signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created is that he created for you mates from amongst yourselves that you may dwell in tranquility with them. I mean, this is the standard, this is the expectation that when people live together as spouses, a man and a woman, they are expected actually to live with harmony and mercy. جعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. If the two spouses, the man and the woman, did not match this criteria, then we are missing something. Maybe they did not match each other from the beginning, they did not have the right choice, there is something missing. Because this is what we are expected actually to have when we get married, harmony and mercy, not anything else. And not only that, treating women in general. And look at this ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually is approaching men and not women, because according to our Islamic tradition and culture, the man actually is the head of the household. Supposedly, he is the head of the household. عاشرهن بالمعروف, and live with them on a footing of kindness and fairness. You started laughing when I said supposedly, right? It might not be the case all the time, I know. Footing of kindness and fairness. This is actually the meaning of al-ma'ruf, that you have to treat your spouse in a nice and in a kind way. If there is no kindness and fairness in treating one's spouse, then again, we are missing something. We did not understand the wisdom behind the permissibility or the legislation of building an usra or a family in Islam. We are missing something definitely. And if you dislike them, it may be that you dislike something and Allah brings a great deal of good through it. As if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us just calm down. Whenever you get angry with your wife, do not just go ahead and make a judgment or a statement based on a particular incident. You should zoom out and look at her, overall performance, overall personality. Okay, one incident or two or even three are not enough for you to make a judgment. There are many good qualities in your wife that sometimes you do not even pay attention to because you get used to. She is very nice, she is very kind, she is very generous, very supportive, very helpful, taking care of you in all of your aspects of your life. So if once in a while she misbehaved herself or could not control her mouth or started talking in an inappropriate way, it doesn't mean that this is the end of your marital life. You need just to be more wise and more prudent. عاشروهن بالمعروف إن كرهتموهن فعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا ويجعل الله فيه خيرا كثيرا. So this is what we have in the Quran. How about the prophetic guidance, where the Prophet ﷺ said clearly, خيركم لأهله, the best amongst you are the best to their families. He didn't say that the best amongst you are those who are fasting the most or praying the most or paying in charity the most. He said خيركم لأهله. It doesn't mean that fasting and praying is not important. No, it means that you have to combine good manners, good behaviors, good attitude when it comes to treating your spouse, because actually she is the one who needs your love, your harmony, your respect, your kindness, your mercy. So خيركم لأهلي, the best amongst you are those who are the best toward their families, and I'm the best toward my family. He set himself ﷺ as usual, as always, as a role model for us. He did show us how to be kind, how to be nice, how to be merciful toward your spouse. He said, وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِي. This is just a hadith that reflects the same concept that we just covered. لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنة. He said عليه الصلاة والسلام, according to Sahih Muslim, a believing husband should not hate his believing wife, meaning because of a particular incident, one time or once in a while, or an irregular bad behaviors or misbehaving herself. If he hated one of her characteristics, he is actually content with her other qualities. Again, you should be wise, you should be fair, you should be prudent. I mean, do not make a judgment and take a decision regarding your marital life because of a particular incident. That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable if your wife once in a while misbehaved herself, but that's something expected. And if you read more in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you will find out for sure. You will find out for sure that the Prophet ﷺ in some particular incidents was unhappy. I want to put it in a very kind and respectful way. The Prophet ﷺ in some particular incidents was unhappy, was displeased with some of the behaviors of his wives, Ummahat al-Mu'mineen radiyallahu anhunna ajmain. At the end of the day, they were just a human being. Okay? I don't want to mention examples because this is not our topic for tonight, but let me repeat myself. In some particular incidents, the Prophet ﷺ was unhappy with some particular behaviors of his wives, our mothers, Ummahat al-Mu'mineen radiyallahu anhunna ajmain. I listened to the testimony of one of the closest people of the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha, the most beloved wife to the Prophet, to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. She said, ما ضرب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم شيئا قط بيده. He never hit anything with his hand. Can we live without domestic violence, without using, while keeping our hands for ourselves? Yes, we can. Is there any example? Yes, this is the example. ما ضرب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم شيئا قط بيده. Okay? He stayed for 23 years as a prophet, as a messenger, as an instructor, as a leader of the whole Muslim community. And you can imagine, how many times he was displeased or disappointed or unhappy with some of the behaviors or activities or, bad attitude or you name it. Yet he did not use his hand to discipline anyone. ما ضرب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم شيئا قط بيده. He did not hit anything. Not only a human being, anything. Neither a woman nor a servant except during jihad. إلا أن يجاهد في سبيله. When it comes to the battlefield and fighting for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a different story. But when it comes to his marital life and his relationship with his Sahaba, with the kids in the community, with the mushrikeen, with the ignorant people, with the knowledgeable people, the Prophet ﷺ, according to Aisha, ما ضرب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم شيئا قط بيده. And this hadith, subhanallah, is a strong evidence that we can live without domestic violence. We can live while keeping our hands for ourselves, and this is what the Prophet ﷺ practiced himself. Not only that, he was strongly and I would say, aggressively criticizing those who take domestic violence as a lifestyle. Listen to this hadith. يَعْمَدُ أَحَدُكُمْ يَجْلِدُ امْرَأَتَهُ جَلْدَ الْعَبْدِ. It means that, how comes that you beat up your wife like you are beating, an animal or a slave or whatever. فَلَعَلَّهُ يُضَاجِعُهَا مِنْ آخِرِ يَوْمِهِ. While he might sleep with her at the end of the day. It means that, how comes that you have, double personality? During the day, you beat her up, you treat her like in an inhuman way, and then at the end of the day, you sleep with her. How comes? You are a person who has two different or double personalities. How comes that you treat her badly during the day and you treat her nicely during the night? It does not work. You have to be either or. يعمد أحدكم يجلد امرأته جلد العبد فلعله يضاجعها من آخر يومه. When we talk about the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes we take it to the extreme. We think that those people were angels. They were the best of the best in this ummah, make no mistake about it. But at the end of the day, they were just humans like us. And look at this real incident. For a reason or another, the Prophet ﷺ said, that's an authentic hadith. He said, لا تضربوا إماء الله. Do not beat the female servants of Allah. Meaning, stop hitting your wives. He was approaching the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ by saying, لا تضربوا إماء الله. Stop hitting your wives. Well, what happened is that women at that time, they took big advantage of this command of the Prophet ﷺ. They took big advantage of that. فجاء عمر إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال ذئرن النساء على أزواجهن. Women afterward rebelled against their husband. They were protected by the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, لا تضربوا إمام الله. So they took big advantage of that. Well, فرخص في ضربهن. So the Prophet ﷺ changed his mind again. Umar told the Prophet ﷺ that Umar told the Prophet what happened. The Prophet ﷺ allowed men to hit their wives. He changed his mind and he allowed them to hit their wives. Husband did aggressively. Now what happened is that husband took big advantage of the command of or the permissibility that the Prophet ﷺ gave to them to go ahead and to physically discipline their wives. فرخص في ضربهن فأطاف بآل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نساء كثير. Now what happened is that the Sahaba, the husbands at the time, they took big advantage of this permissibility that he gave to them, or the permission he gave to them, and they started not only hitting their wives but actually beating them up. So they took big advantage of the permission of the Prophet ﷺ, and the women came complaining what happened to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. He commented by saying, لقد طاف بآل محمد نساء كثير يشكون أزواجهن. Many women came to my household, to my wives, complaining the misbehaviors and the aggression of their husbands. Listen, ليس أولئك بخياركم. Those people are not the best amongst you. Prophet ﷺ was disciplining, okay, and applying terbi, or the self-discipline, the self-development of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, by saying, ليس أولئك بخياركم. Those who did such and such are not the best amongst you. Meaning that actually he was recommending them, or even commanding them not to hit their wives. Now the cultural, what I call it, the cultural practice that the Imam before leaving was pointing to, that sometimes we have a certain practice, and it is a cultural more than to be a religious one. And among the cultural practices is just beating or hitting wives regularly, for a reason, for no reason, for legitimate reason, for illegitimate reason. Some husbands just tend to just hit their wives. And they always jump to the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah An-Nisa, الرجال قوامون على النساء. That's why I call this slide quoted but misquoted. Unfortunately, we misunderstand those ayat. We try to abuse the ayah or understand it in the way that we want. So he said Azza wa Jal, الرجال قوامون على النساء, and they want to keep it as is. Men are قوامون, meaning that the protectors and the maintainers of women, because Allah has given one more strength than the other. بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the physical ability, that a man actually is more capable to go early in the morning and to work and to make the earning or the living for the family. وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, as well as because they support them from their means. Now this is the first part of the ayah that many people nowadays misquote or misunderstand, or unfortunately they try to just abuse the ayah and understand it in a wrong way. Okay. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهِ. This is the ideal situation. Therefore, the righteous women are devotedly obedient and guard in the husband's absence what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have them to guard. Here is the part of the ayah that I want to emphasize. وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ. As for those women, you fear their disloyalty. And this is the meaning of النشوز, disloyalty and ill conduct. تخافون نشوزهن. Okay, admonish them first. فعظوهن. Okay, and then next, وهجروهن في المضاجع, refuse to share their beds, and then last, hit them. واضربوهن. But if they return to obedience, فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا. Seek not against them means of annoyance, for Allah is the most high and great. اللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع. Number 2, واضربوهن, hit them or physically discipline them. فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا. I want you to help me counting how many misunderstanding we have in this ayah, or some of us have in this ayah. First of all, what does al-qawama mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الرجال قوامون. الرجال قوامون. So the husband actually would say, I'm the qawwam here. I'm the qawwam here means that I'm the Superman, I'm the hero here, as if we are wrestling. I'm in charge here. الرجال قوامون على النساء, and this is the only thing that they know from the Quran. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Okay, al-qawam actually means dutifulness. Linguistically speaking, it means dutifulness or steadfastness or dedication in fulfilling one's responsibilities. Where did we get this understanding or definition from? Actually from the Quran itself. Because actually al-qawama was mentioned many times in the Quran. Listen to this ayah. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين. That's the exact term. كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله. Stand firmly for justice and bear true witness for the sake of Allah. قوامين. So when you stand firmly, when you are steadfast for a noble cause, then you are qawwam. You are fulfilling your duties. You are assuming your responsibility. This is the meaning actually of al-qawama. And in the second ayah, which is very similar to the first one, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط. Be steadfast for Allah's cause and bear true witnesses. Bear true witnesses. So it is almost the same meaning. Al-qawama means dutifulness, taking or assuming the responsibility. It does not give an authority of abusing other people. It does not give the meaning of being like aggressive or a bad person who is taking full advantage of his position as the husband or the head of the household to start abusing and bothering other people. قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط. Steadfast for Allah's cause and bear true witness. So al-qawama is the duty and authority at the same time. Back to the ayah, الرجال قوامون على النساء. It means that a man is the qawwam, is the person in charge, is the one who is assuming to take his responsibility. He should sponsor the whole family. He should take care of the whole family, but it does not actually give him the right of aggressiveness and toughness and harshness in dealing with his household, especially with his wife. And the second misconception is النشوز. واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن. Here's the ayah one more time. واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن. As for those women, you fear their disloyalty and ill conduct. Now, is it true that if your wife or if the wife once in a while, not occasionally, not frequently, once in a while, misbehaved herself, she did not, act accordingly, she did not show the due respect to her husband, is this called nushuz? Is this called nushuz? Listen to this. And nushuz actually means wives' rebellion against the husband. It means disloyalty or disobedience or disrespect or ill conduct. It is an attitude again and a lifestyle. So if once in a while a wife misbehaved herself and this is not her general attitude, she is not nashiz, believe it or not. Otherwise, I mean, if you want to be so aggressive in understanding the word al-nushuz, then even the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were nashizat radiallahu anhum. Because again, there are some certain incidents in the seerah in which the Prophet ﷺ was angry, was displeased with some of the behaviors of his wives. And no one actually could claim that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were nashizat. They were the best of the best, radiallahu anhunna ajmain. So if an-nushuz actually became like an attitude, like a lifestyle, I mean, always the wife, rebelling, always the wife is, showing disrespect, always the wife, neglecting her husband, just leaves the house without taking his permission. If it became an attitude, a common practice in her daily life, then she is nashiz, and whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded in this ayah should be applied for this particular wife. But once in a while and in an irregular basis, we cannot actually count her as imra'atun nashiz. And the third misconception, the verse advises a gradual manner in handling that extreme case. عِظُوهُنَّ وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah in his famous book Al-Umm, when he was commenting on this ayah, he said that going in order is a must. You cannot, just jump and ignore the first discipline. عِظُوهُنَّ. Admonish her. Talk to her nicely. Talk to her sweetly. She is your life partner. She is the mother of your kids. Do not just ignore the first discipline and the second one, you jump all the way to the third one by just beating her up. This is not correct. عِظُوهُنَّ, number one. وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, abandon them in beds, just to sleep somewhere else within your house. Do not go outside. And then, if none of the above is working, in some extreme cases, if admonishing and talking to her once, twice, thrice, 5 times, 10 times, if this did not work for some reason, then you can just abandon her by sleeping somewhere else, okay, outside the bedroom, but within the house. If none is working, then you can go to the as deemed appropriate. You can go to the third option, which is lightly hitting your wife, as it now will be explained. And then he said subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. If they stop, you stop too. Do not take advantage. So actually the permissibility or the permission of going with the third option is conditioned to what? To her misbehaviors. Once she started behaving herself and just going back to the to the norm, then you have to stop. Otherwise, actually, you are the aggressive. You are the one who is violating Allah's commands. Okay, the fourth misconception. Even if you choose, although you don't have to, as we said that the Prophet ﷺ lived his whole life without hitting anything. Okay. Now, even if you choose to go with the third option, with the third discipline in order, then hitting but not beating. And there is a big difference between hitting and beating. The Prophet ﷺ, in front of 144,000 of his Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in Khutbatul Wada', in the farewell speech, when he was performing Hajj ﷺ, he gave a khutbah. It's a very famous khutbah in the Islamic history. In front of all those Sahaba, 144,000 Sahabi, he said, while he was addressing this issue, قال فَضْرِبُوهُنَّ ضَرْبًا غَيْرَ مُبَرِّحٍ. Light and not harsh. Light, it's a symbolic hitting, it's not an actual or a physical one. Abdullah ibn Abbas, one of the most knowledgeable people in the Muslim Ummah, he said, اضربوهن, that Abdullah ibn Abbas said, it is hitting with a siwak. Siwak, or the or a tooth, something like a toothbrush or a woody stick that we use, for brushing our teeth. This is the siwak. Something very, very symbolic, something that does not affect her physically. It affects her actually emotionally, but not physically. So it is a symbolic hitting and not a real or an aggressive one. Scholars said that it should not leave any marks or bruises. It is a symbolic and a normal hitting, not a real one. So far we have 4 different misconceptions in understanding the ayah. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Now the 5th one, is it true that every single act by any of the Sahaba is a legislation by itself? Should we follow the practice of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum 100%? The answer, with all due respect, no. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum were the best of the best. Loving and respecting and appreciating the Sahaba is a part of our religion. We devote ourselves by loving and respecting the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, yet we do not take their practice as a sort of legislation, except in some cases. So if one of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een misunderstood or misbehaved himself, or he acted in an inappropriate way, it does not mean that what he did is correct, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to follow whom? To follow His command and to follow the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. And the Prophet of Allah Azza wa Jal, there is a role model and good example for you. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ. All you who believe, obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet. So following the practice of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum blindly is not a part of our religion. Again, I wish no one would misunderstand me. Let me just repeat myself one more time. Loving and respecting and appreciating the Sahaba radiallahu anhum is a part of our religion. We do not actually disgrade any one of them, no matter what. But again, this does not mean that their practice is a part of the Islamic legislation. It is not, except in just in a few cases. Why I'm saying so? Because of the incident that when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum took big advantage and they started beating up their wives and on. Also, there is a hadith that is a weak narration. It's not a correct one. It's not an authentic one. I mean, from a sanad, from a chain of narrators perspective, the hadith is weak. لا يسأل الرجل فيما ضرب زوجته. A husband should not be asked on why he hit his wife. Well, this is not an authentic hadith, so we cannot take it as a legislation. And second of all, even if it is just assuming, hypothetically assuming that this hadith is a correct one, is an authentic one, then it should be actually applied for the intruders. Like if someone actually has nothing to do with you and asks you why you hit your wife, your answer is, it's none of your business. It's none of your business. But actually it's not applied for the authority. I mean, if your wife filed the case against you in front of the judge, you cannot tell the judge it's not of your business. Well, it is his business. Okay? So لا يسأل الرجل فيما ضرب زوجته is a weak narration. Even if it is correct, it is applied to the intruders and not to the Muslim authority. There are some certain rules in which our scholars are unanimous. There is a unanimity, there is a consensus regarding the following rules. Okay, number one, hitting on the face is prohibited at all times with wives and others. وَلَا تَضْرِبِ الْوَجْهِ. This is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. So even if someone wants to go with the third option, with the most severe one, which is to use the physical discipline, you have to stay away from her face. This is number one. And number two, severe beating that leaves marks and bruises is prohibited too, because the Prophet ﷺ said, فَضْرِبُهُنَّ ضَرْبًا غَيْرَ مُبَرِّحٍ. غَيْرَ مُبَرِّحٍ. Hit them lightly. Again, it's a very symbolic, it's a very nominal hitting. It's not a real one, it's not a physical one. Okay? So leaving bruises and marks and shedding her blood is obviously prohibited, even not on the face. And number three, severe beating would grant the wife the right for divorce. Can she apply for divorce if she has been abused or has been mistreated by her husband? This is a very legitimate excuse, very legitimate reason for her to apply for divorce. She cannot live with him. I mean, she cannot be just mistreated at home. She's asking for divorce. That's her right. And the Muslim judge can just divorce her, by force from her husband if he refuses to divorce her friendly. And not only that, look at this hadith. Allah, that's a very amazing hadith. Amazing hadith. What happened is that the wife of Thabit ibn Qais, radiallahu anhu, one of the Sahaba, came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she complained to him that she does not love Thabit ibn Qais. For some reason, they do not have that, chemistry, compatibility. They do not get along with each other. She said, Ya Rasulullah, Thabit ibn Qais, ما أعتب عليه في خلق ولا دين. I have nothing to say regarding his commitment to his deen, his manners. He is a perfect husband. He is a very nice guy. Okay? Behaving himself very well, with a very nice attitude. He is a very practicing and committed Muslim. ما أعتب عليه في خلق ولا دين. However, ولكني أكره الكفر في الإسلام. It means that I do not appreciate him as a husband. I do not have that feeling toward him. Let me just put it in this way. Okay? We do not get along with each other. There is no chemistry, there is no compatibility. We do not get along with each other. And believe it or not, that the Prophet ﷺ took this statement as a legitimate excuse for her to get her divorce. Not divorce, khulu, which is the compensated divorce. Khulu actually is an offer by the husband, by the wife, that she get her divorce. I mean, she is the one who is applying for divorce for a certain amount of money or for a compensation. She could waive her husband from the delayed dowry or just pay him a particular amount of money, whatever they agreed on. That's called khulu. It's a termination of the marriage contract in a different way. So it was brought to his attention والسلام, that Thabit ibn Qais gave her like a piece of land, like a garden, okay, as a dowry, as a mahr. So he said, أتردين عليه حديقته are you willing to return the garden or the mahr back to him? She said, yes. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم اقبل الحديقة وطلقها تطليقة. O Thabit ibn Qais, take your dowry back, and that's khulu' by the way, and just divorce her. Why the Prophet ﷺ allowed her to get her divorce? Because she does not have a feeling toward her husband. There was no physical abuse, no emotional abuse, nothing whatsoever. She was the one who said, ما أعتب عليه في خلق ولا دين. I have nothing to criticize. I have nothing to say against him. He is a perfect guy, perfect husband. Okay, with the very religious, very practicing, very behaving person. However, I don't like him. I don't love him. And the Prophet ﷺ highly appreciated what she said, and he just granted her divorce or her khulu'. قال خذ الحديقة وطلقها تطليقة. What I want to say here is that the marital life is started and continued based on the mutual consent or the mutual agreement of the two spouses, the two parties. If in one day, because of any reason, they lost that compatibility or chemistry, they do not, or they started not getting along with each other, they do have the right for divorce. إمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. جعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. He created mercy and harmony between you. So if there is no mercy, if there is no harmony, if they just enforcing themselves to stay with each other, then what's the point? I mean, why should we just resist? You just go ahead and get your divorce. Subhanallah, إن يتفرقا يغني الله من سعته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might grant her a husband that's better than you, and grant you a wife that's better than her. So just take it very easy. I mean, do not complicate the issue. قال اقبل الحديقة وطلقها تطليقة. One of the authorities or the permissions that the Prophet ﷺ gave to us parents actually is to, I don't want to use the word hit or beat, is to physically discipline our kids as needed. If they refrain, if they resist from doing their salah accordingly, or refrain from doing any of the Islamic obligations, then interfering and correcting their misbehaviors by physically disciplining them is allowed. It is allowed. Okay? Listen to this hadith. مروا أبناءكم بالصلاة وهم أبناء سبع. Meaning, command your kids to pray when they are 7. When they are 7. And then he said, وَاضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ أَبْنَاءُ عَشْرٍ. Hit them when not praying when they are 10. And I want to stop here. After how many years of training and following up, teaching, instructing the kids to pray on time, to pray accordingly, and to make their wudu, to come to the masjid, to pray with the jama'ah. After how many years the Prophet ﷺ allowed us parents to physically discipline our kids? It's not a one-time command. Baba, stand up and pray. Come with me to the salah. And if not, then you start just hitting him or beating him up. It does not work this way. 3 continuous years. You start working diligently, hardly from the age of 7. The matter of fact, you should start training your kids praying before the age of 7. But here's the hadith. مروا أبناءكم بصلاة السبع. Command them to start praying at the age of 7. It does not mean that they should not pray or they are free not to pray before 7. No. I mean, you should start training them. But when they turn 7 years old, then you start commanding them to pray. مروا أبناءكم. Command your kids to pray at the age of 7. And you start working hardly, diligently, frequently, regularly, in daily basis. That's your job. That's your job. And subhanAllah, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا. Command your family to perform or to establish salah and be patient in that. Because following up with your kids is a hard job. It's a daily hard job that every single one of us practicing Muslims are going through. I find it really hard to discipline my kids. I have 3 teenagers, 19, 16 and 14 years old, in addition to the children that I have. Wallahi, it's a daily struggle. I have to follow up with my kids on daily basis. I have to make sure that they perform their wudu correctly, for the girls to stay home and to pray Salatul Jama'ah with their mom, for my son to go with me to the masjid. I have to make sure that he's dressing accordingly, he's praying accordingly. He made his wudu accordingly. He did the adhkar after the salah, and he made the sunnah. And I have to go through this pain every single day. Every single day. That's a very painful job, but I have no excuse but to fulfill what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded me to do. Okay? So after 3 years of the continuous and the hard work, the Prophet ﷺ said, وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا لِعَشْرٍ. Hit them when not praying. Is it a command or just recommendation? It is actually a recommendation. You don't have to hit them. Every single person responds to a different strategies, different way of disciplining. And subhanAllah, I have an experience with my kids. Some of them actually it's enough for him or her just to look at him like this seriously, and then he would recognize that he or she did something wrong. Sometimes, excuse me, I have to scream, I have to shout. No response whatsoever. I mean, looking at him like this does not scare him. I have to scare him in a way or another, and I have no choice but to scare him to take it seriously. So as I said, different people respond to different strategies or different ways of disciplining. Now you know your kids more than anybody else. If you find out that in a particular case, your son or your daughter is so rebelling, not responding, misbehaving, him or herself, does not listening, does not respect the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you found out that interfering and just applying the physical discipline as needed, wisely, only as needed, is the best solution for him or for her to behave himself or herself, you can go ahead and do it. This is a permission from the Prophet ﷺ. But do we have to apply it? We don't have to. So it is just a recommendation or just a permission. It's up to you. It's up to your assessment. You know your kids more than anybody else. So back to the point. مروا أبناءكم بالصلاة وهم أبناء سبع. Command your kids to pray when they are 7. Hit them as needed when not praying when they are 10, and separate them in beds. There are some other restrictions that have been mentioned in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. لا عقوبة فوق 10 ضربات إلا في حد من حدود الله. That's narrated by Imam Al-Bukhari. No hitting for more than 10 times or 10 lashes, if you wish, is allowed, except if identified or indicated in the prescribed penalty. You cannot be aggressive. You cannot take it for more than 10 times hitting your child per incident. More than 10 times is not allowed. This is actually just to show you how restricted this permission is. You use it as needed, and do not. You have to limit yourself to 10 times of hitting. Same rule of hitting a woman is applied. No severe or aggressive beating is allowed, as we already explained. Hitting allowed only when deemed appropriate. Again, it should not be like a lifestyle or just the first solution that you think about. You just start screaming and shouting and just beating up the other party because you realize that he or she is not behaving himself or herself appropriately. When it comes to the other obligations, what if your son did not fast while he is 10 years old? Is it allowed for you to physically discipline him? Yes. What if your 10 years old daughter did not cover her head or abide with her abaya, with her hijab while going out while she is 10 years old? Well, can you physically discipline your daughter? Yes, you can. Should you physically discipline your daughter? It's up to you. You judge the situation. You know what is the best strategy, what the best technique might work the best with your daughter. But it is actually permissible to physically discipline your kids whenever they violate the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Islamic obligations from the age of 10 years old and up. That's something very relevant to our topic, which is what is called here marital rape. Do we believe in Islam that there is something called marital rape? We do not believe in that. We do not believe in that. It's a non-Islamic culture, because there is no rape between the spouses. Rape actually is defined as forced fornication. Al-ikrahu ala zina. Al-ikrahu ala zina. Forced fornication. So when people actually have a legitimate conjugal relation, spouses, husband and wife, there is nothing called fornication or adultery. There is nothing like this. So, so the sexual relation between spouses is not defined actually as fornication. So to start with, we disagree with the term itself. There is nothing in Islam called marital rape. We can call it like forced intercourse, forced sexual intercourse. That's I mean, it makes sense from an Islamic perspective. It could be, you know, digested. So it is al-ikrahu ala al-jima'. It is the forced sexual intercourse. Okay, what we need to know here is that refraining from the call of the husband, okay, by the wife is not allowed. It is a sin, especially if she does not have any excuse. If she does not have any excuse, then she has to respond to the call of her husband. This is what the Prophet ﷺ made clear in the hadith. If she is excused, then that's a different rule, different story. But to start with, responding to the call of the husband, you know, to bed, is a must upon the wife. And meanwhile, the husband actually is the one who knows the physical and the sexual ability of his wife. So he has to be reasonable. He has to be kind. He has to be reasonable when he asks for his right. This is actually a part of al-ma'ruf, the kindness and the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling for. He said, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and treat them with mercy, with kindness. And ask him for the physical right or the sexual right, aggressively more than what she can tolerate is against al-ma'ruf that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling for. So forced intercourse is a kind of abuse. It is actually a kind of abuse. It causes a damage, like a physical and psychological harm. And subhanallah, it defeats the purpose of having that romance between the spouses when they spend some time together, fulfilling their or responding to their physical need. As I said, it damages the good relationship between the spouses. Now there are some rules that we need to be aware of, which is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا ضرر ولا ضرار. Now to issue a rule regarding the forced sexual intercourse, or al-ikrahu ala al-jima', or what is called here in the American culture that's called the marital rape, we need to know, to derive a rule or to come up with the status of the marital rape. We need to remember this hadith: لا ضرر ولا ضرار. Harming oneself or harming others, both are not allowed. So this is a basic rule in Islam. This is a fiqh maxim. This is qa'idatun fiqhiyya and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that harming oneself or harming others is not allowed. So forced intercourse is not allowed. Can a Muslim husband enforce, or does he have the right to force his wife? I mean, by physically by force, by using his hand or physical discipline, just to enforce her to fulfill his sexual desire or his call for bed. Actually, he is not allowed. He cannot. There are many techniques or many ways that this problem could be resolved, because we have sisters. I'm going to just skip some of those minutes. In some societies where polygamy or multi-marriage is allowed, if the husband found out that his wife is not, or one wife is not sufficient for him for a reason or another, he cannot find his sexual pleasure with only one wife, and polygamy is allowed in that particular society, then actually he can just look for a second or even third or even fourth marriage, to fulfill his his natural need. In the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, this is just a lesson for us husbands. It was authentically narrated that the Prophet ﷺ has met with a lady for marriage purposes. He has met with the lady for marriage purposes. So when he approached her, she said, "A'udhu billahi mink." I seek refuge by Allah from you. And look at the dignity, the self-respect of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, لَقَدْ اسْتَعَذْتِ بِعَظِيمِ الْحَقِّ بِأَهْلِكِ. He was approaching her for marriage purposes. even before they, get married, according to the most, authentic understanding of this hadith, that they did not get married yet. So he was, just talking to her, approaching her to talk about marriage. قال هبي نفسك لي, like, well, the Prophet ﷺ has some different rules or special rules for him. He does not have to get involved in mutual, like, offer and acceptance. His wife does not have to have a wali or two witnesses. I mean, this is one of the special rules only for the Prophet ﷺ. So he approached this lady by saying, Habi nafsaki li, gift yourself to me. Okay, gift yourself, meaning that allow me to get married with you. And this was, the way that he used to conduct his own marriage contract ﷺ. فقالت أعوذ بالله منك, I seek refuge by Allah from you. And again, look at the dignity of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, لقد استعذت بعظيم الحق بأهلك. He didn't even mind, just go back to your family. I don't want him. So the lesson that we husbands should learn, that if the wife is, consistently, regularly resist and refuse the call for the bed, it means that she has something in mind, and it is obviously against your dignity as a husband to keep staying with this lady. If she insists on her bad attitude and not responding for no legitimate reason, then الحقي بأهلك, you just go back to your you go back to your family, meaning you are divorced. Let me just wrap up all or just summarize the main points that we discussed in this seminar. Domestic violence is different from physical discipline. This is from a pure fiqh and Islamic perspective. Physical discipline is different from domestic violence, to start with. Number two, Islam mandates kind treatment, especially between spouses. This is what we are expected to have when we get to together, in the marriage or in the marital relationship. Various Islamic ways of disciplining husband can use for his wife and kids. Physical discipline is not the only solution. It could be completely skipped, as the Prophet ﷺ applied, as it was narrated. Forced intercourse and not marital rape is not allowed. Physical discipline could be avoided completely, and I want you to remember the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, ما ضرب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم شيئا قط. The Prophet ﷺ never ever hit anything with his hand, إلا لامرأة ولا خادم, neither a woman like a wife or a servant or anyone, إلا أن يجاهد في سبيل, except during the jihad time. Severity and excess in applying physical discipline would render it to be a domestic violence, and this is actually a part of our differentiation between the physical discipline and the domestic violence. Using this strategy or this technique, the physical discipline, as needed by an authorized person, like a husband with his wife, like a father with his kids, like a teacher with his students, like a ruler with his community. Exaggerating using this right might render it to become like a domestic violence. Physical discipline is permissible only after exhausting other means. Remember the ayah, عِضُوهُنَّ, admonish them, اهجروهن في المضاجع, abandon them in bed, واضربوهن, and then as deemed appropriate, then you can physically discipline them. Domestic violence, according to this understanding, is prohibited in Islam. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ما علمتنا وزدنا علما. صلى الله على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.